Welcome back to our RPG tutorials. And this is the game so far. So I polished it up a little bit, so now the animations are actually not terrible. So we can pick up the axe, we can put it back, and it kind of looks good. So in this video, what we are going to add is a way to actually kill this goblin. So I was working with the collision boxes, so I tried to put the collision box in here and then tried to hit this collision box that has the goblin, but it would not work. So I tried like a million times, but it still would not work. So the solution that I came up with is by casting a ray where his hand is. So now we are casting a ray right there, and the ray is working perfectly fine, as we can see into our console. So every time we hit him, we get a couple of messages that show us that we actually hit his spine. So how can we achieve that? Well, first of all, we are going to have to place a collision object inside of our NPC right here. So in here, what I done is I went into his spine 1 right here, and I just added a very simple capsule collider. What you can do is obviously go into any of his limbs. So right here, for example, his right arm, his right leg, add a collision object. Maybe you want to add a capsule collider. And now we have a capsule collider for his legs. So I don't recommend going and adding each limb and each finger. Just add in a basic one and then we're done with that. And after we add a collision, we are going to make sure we transfer this collision box into our NPC. So there's a couple of ways of doing that. We can do the old trick where we had a script that transfers the damage from this object in here over to our NPC. Or what we can do is where we cast the ray. This is, by the way, how we cast the ray. So what we can do now is access this hit object, and what we can say is hit.transform.root. Now this will return us the root object, and you might have guessed what the root object holds. It holds our NPC controller. So let's make some simple adjustments. So for example, what do we want to do with the root? Well, we want to go into our NPC controller and we want to add in a function that receives damage. So let's do a public, don't forget to make it public, void receive damage. Now in here we want to receive a input and we're going to call it float value. So what do we want to do with this value? Well, we first want to trigger the animation, and the animation is take damage. So you can get this animation from Mix Ammo, and I've already added it into my NPC. So this is the Goblin NPC. You can get all these animations for free in mixammo.com. So you simply drag a animation, drop it into our animator, and that is all I have in here. I have this transition, and the transition is kind of new to us because it is using a trigger. So just add in a new trigger in here, and I've named my trigger take damage. So I'm gonna copy this string, go back into my script, and I want to access the animator, and I want to tell it to set trigger take damage. After I set the trigger, I want my health to be decreased by this value. So let's set the health minus equal to value. Later on, we can do our checks and ask if the value of the health is less than 0, then the player dies. So for now, we're gonna leave it like this, and we want to set our health slider into our update. We want to tell it health slider.value is equal to health. Before we set the slider, I actually said it twice, I'm so stupid. Before we set this slider, we want to define a maximum value for this slider. So I'm gonna copy slider, I'm gonna go into start, and in here I'm going to say health slider.max value is equal to health, because we start as max health. So that is all nice and good. Now let's go into our melee and let's work in here. So what do we want to do in here? We want to say hit.transform.root get component NPC. So now that we got our controller, we just want to say receive damage, and we want to just transfer this damage over to here, and now we're done. But before we do that, we want to do a simple check and ask if the hit object actually has this NPC. So just gonna say if this is not equal to null, then we proceed to do this. So now if we've done everything correctly, we should have a working system. So let's go back into my game. Let's hit play. I'm gonna bring up my weapon, and now let's go ahead and try and attack him. Okay, we just one hit him. So that is actually quite simple. Maybe we want to do something a little bit better and make this axe deal just a little bit less damage, like 25 for example. So let's go back into my game. Let's bring my axe, and he still takes too much damage for some reason. Okay, so the reason for that is actually not the damage, because the damage is actually fine. But as we can see in here, this hit is being called like 100 times. So let's fix that. Let's use a boolean in here, and I've already defined it. It is called has hit. So where we ask if the hit object has this NPC controller, let's also ask if this hit is not equal to true. So after we hit, we want to open our brackets, we want to close them down here, and we want to say has hit is equal to true. So now we have no way of resetting this has hit from this melee status. So what we're going to do is access it from our controller. So what I did in here is I've already made this function, and I'll make it again for the purpose of this video. So what we're going to do is access this melee right here, and we already have a way of accessing. The way that we did it is that we already instantiated up here, so now we just access it. So here is our melee, and it is a game object. So in our melee, we are going to have to get the component. Component is called melee stats, and into the melee stats, we just want to say has hit is equal to false. So now we can go back into our game, and we should be able to deliver only one hit into this goblin. So let's see if it worked. Okay, as we can see, we are delivering only one hit. And now we successfully killed him. So later on, we are going to obviously add the animations where he dies and when he attacks us back. But that's it for this one. I hope you liked it, I hope you enjoyed it, and we are going to see each other in the next videos.